Sugarlon Leo, I'm Medicine, and I'd just like to say thank you so much for stopping by. So this is what I'd like to call a medicine, a metascope. And really, the idea is that this is very integrative. We're doing astrology here along with tarot, along with numerology, along with geomancy. And so we're doing different forms of divination. And so it's just a very integrative divination system that is developed here. And, taken from different inspirational, once again, geomancy, you know, necromancy, even, I feel is a part of this as well. So, anyway, this Metascope is for the first trimester of Libra. And just to clarify that, each zodiac sign has its own season. That would be the month of that zodiac sign. So, for example, Libra's zodiac month may be anywhere from the 21st until of September to the maybe the 22nd or somewhere around there of October. And each season, each zodiac season has 3 trimesters. We're talking about the first trimester of Libra. And really the intention behind this reading is to really help us to understand how best to walk through and to be in alignment with our own will of the year, with the seasons and with the medicine year. It's worth it to note that although Libra has its own season, and that season is always sometime between October and, or rather September and October, it is worth it to note that different things are happening to each person at that time. So even though the overarching season might be the beginning of autumn or fall, for example, for you it may feel a different way. The feeling and the energy behind it for you might look or feel very different. So we're looking at how the first trimester of Libra relates to Leo. Okay. And this is where we start to really get into the houses, for example, because the houses they don't just talk about different placements, but they also talk about how you relate to the season. So let's just go ahead and get right into it. The Shaman of Birth is going to be the first card. It represents the first trimester of Libra. Okay. And this is that time between September 23rd to October 3rd. Okay. That time is the first trimester of Libra. That period is the first trimester of the Libra season. And the Shaman of Birth represents that first trimester in the Libra season. So first of all, the Shaman of Birth is all about birthing something, obviously, but what you're trying to birth, how you're trying to birth it, and what stage is it being birthed. It's all a matter of perspective. And we really do have to kind of break this down. What this card really has to do with is Libra's ability to communicate, be in communication between the external and the internal. The feminine represents your internal, the masculine The gentleman holding the spear here represents your external. Okay. Um, the feminine represents shadow and darkness, and the masculine represents the light. So, what we're doing here is we are creating a balance, a marriage, if you will, between these two forces within the self. There's a lot of, you know, because Libra is an air sign and air is a masculine energy, it's a very external energy. However, Libra is also in the West, and Libra brings in the time of autumn. Autumn is a time of death and transformation. It's a time of decay. Libra is also in alignment with the twilight hours of evening. And so it's bringing in the darkness. So Libra's energy communicates between the dark and the light. It communicates between day and night. Feminine representing night, masculine representing day. So when we talk about a marriage, we're talking about that sort of marriage. A marriage, a partnership between the masculine light day energy that is also mental and is also spiritual energy, and the physical, emotional, feminine, yin, uh, um, shadowy night energy of the female energy. The female energy is receptive. The masculine energy is more transmitting and more active. The feminine energy holds space. The masculine energy um, acts, does, goes out, and is determined to get what it needs, while the feminine energy holds the space. So before we have a physical birth, before you conceive physically, there is a spiritual birth that happens be first and beforehand. It's the spiritual birth that we're looking at. This partnership um, gives us opportunity to create. Many opportunities open up when you are in partnership with the day and the night, with the light and the shadow, with the masculine and the feminine, with emotion and mental, with spiritual and physical. Many opportunities open up. And a product of love uh, is created from that partnership, from that balance. Doesn't have to literally mean a male and a female. It can especially mean feminine energy, masculine energy. Feminine energy being that which is receptive, which is supportive, which holds space. Feminine energy is inner strength. Masculine energy is transmitting, is active, and is aggressive, and is it works on the forefront. Both the feminine and the masculine energies are leader energies. One simply leads behind the scenes, the other one leads at the forefront. So when people look at the forefront, they see your masculine side. But the feminine side leads behind the scenes. Without the feminine side, the masculine side can do nothing, because how can how can anything be birthed without the feminine side? So that being said, Leo, the masculine energy here has to do with how you show up in the world, while the feminine energy has to do with the secrets, the things behind the scenes that people don't see. The feminine energy has more to do with the back end foundation leader like work. The masculine energy has to do with how you show up. So, in the case of a rising sign, for example, your rising sign is how you show up to the world. Your sun sign is how you show up to the world. Your moon sign, on the other hand, is the inner strength and is the leader, is that which leads on the back end. Your moon sign is that invisible leader, while your sun sign is the visible leader. You understand? So, so what we're really looking at is how when we create a partnership between these two energies, your sun sign and your moon sign, we create a product of love from that. Okay? For you, this card is placed. I got everything kind of turned around, so you got to give me a second to figure this out. Okay. Yeah. This card is placed here for you in your third house. Um, because after Libra, after Leo, you get Virgo and then Libra. So this card is placed here for you in your third house. And the third house is all about communication. Libra has a natural connection to the third house because Libra's energy trines with the third house. And that means it has an intuitive flow. So the Libra energy here, the third house, we take a look at community and we take a look at uh, youthfulness and we take a look at friendships and communication and gathering intel and information. So my guess for you, Leo, is that your communication tends to be more one-on-one with people than it is. I mean, you may have a community of people but your communication may tend to be a little bit more one-on-one. But more to the point, the shaman of birth in your third house, we're really taking a look at what is in your community, perhaps, right? That is a reflection of that inner self, that moon self, that feminine self, that shadow self. Libra tends to communicate with the other side. You understand? Libra, the partnership is between the visible and the invisible realms. And there is a truth flowing out there within the metasphere that um, we are all reflections of one another. And if we are all reflections of one another, what it means is that who you communicate with um, is reflecting something that is inside of yourself, whether you're aware of it or not. So there is some intercommunication going on. At this time, we're looking at gathering intel for you, Leo. This is a time for you to gather information. But I want you to understand that this is also a time for you to be very mindful that who you're allowing the invisible self, the feminine self, to um, do the work. You're allowing that to do the communication, to help you find the partners that really resonate with your moon side versus your sun side, are with your seventh house energy versus your first house energy. You understand? So there might be times where you fall into, um depending on what your rising sign is, you might find yourself speaking to others who um are the opposite of your rising sign. So, for example, as a Leo, you may find yourself in communication. If you have a Leo rising, you may find yourself with Aquarius type people at this time, because they represent the invisible you. You understand? Um, if your rising is in Cancer, you may find yourself in communication with more Capricorns at this time. You understand? It's all about opposites attract. We're talking about sun sign and moon sign, first house and seventh house. And both of these aspects they're polar opposites. The first house is about self, the seventh house is about partnership. Then they're polar opposites. The sun and the moon are polar opposites, but they attract one another. So if your moon sign, for example, is in Aries and you're a Leo, it may be that you talk to more Aries at this time. If your moon sign is in Capricorn, or if it's in, let's say another one, let's say it's in Pisces, you might find yourself in communication with Pisces kind of people. Because what you're trying to do is you're trying to communicate with the other side. Okay? And you are trying to have that other side communicate with you. So, who you consciously see yourself as, um, you're trying to get the other side to communicate with you. The other side may look like whatever your moon sign is or whatever your seventh house is. That might be the other side for you, Leo. Okay? Um, and so you're out there in the community at this time and creating partnership. You may tend to partner up at this time with someone who represents an invisible force, an invisible side of yourself that you're just not consciously aware of. You might very much identify as a Leo, or you might identify strongly with your moon sign. That's possible as well. But the sun sign is the conscious force. I just want that to be understood. Your rising sign is your conscious force. The rising sign and the sun sign represent two conscious forces. Rising sign having to do with how people see you, your self-image, how you react and interact with the world. Sun sign having to do with how you create in the world and an externalized value. Your moon sign and your seventh house have more to do with that unconscious side of self, the side that you're not aware of, the side that nurtures your feelings and your emotions a little bit more. Seventh house has a lot to do with, that's why, I don't know if you've ever heard this in astrology, but your seventh house aspects pertain to those who you are attracted most to and have more respect for, a kind of thing. Because the seventh house aspects represents an invisible side of yourself. So what you're really doing is creating partnership and marriage with yourself, whether that's a business partnership, whatever have you. It's creating it with yourself. I just got this feeling that some of you might be going to school, and finding partnerships, creating partnerships in school, because the third house is a really great time to really, if you were thinking about, going to school at this time, if you were thinking about taking some classes on something new, the third house is a really great time for that. And then I just got, and it may be that while you are, in this new school and taking these new classes or these new courses, likely something that you have yet to, something new for you, something that maybe you've always wanted to do but never got to do. I got that, I was getting from spirit that it may be a chance that you might end up in a partnership there. For those of you who are in romantic partnerships, if this resonates with you or not, I want you to consider that at this time, a lot of the communication that you're going to be doing is going to have to do, the people that you communicate with, it may be that you're especially attracted because of an invisible force towards whatever is in your moon, whatever is in your seventh house, or even whatever is in your Juno. Juno has a lot to do with, who we're going to, marriage and relationship too. So, whatever is in your Juno, feel free to look these things up. Astro.com, for example, will give you all three. It'll show you your rising sign. It'll give you Juno. It will give you, it'll tell you what your seventh house is in. You already know your sun sign, right, Leo, because you're a Leo. That's why you're here, unless you're a Leo rising, and that's why you've come here too, which is perfectly fine. But what we're really looking at with this is, you know, where, the more that you understand about your inner self, the more you, for example, like my moon sign is Aries. My seventh house is in Virgo. And my Juno personally is in Sagittarius. So I tend to be attracted a lot to those type energies, to like Aries and Virgo and Sagittarius type energies, because those are where my seventh house, my Juno, and my moon sign are. They are so, um, but it's learning how to communicate with those energies. So, let's say your seventh, let's say that, your sun sign is in one and your moon sign is in the other. Coming back to that, we're really learning how the two of them communicate together in partnership. On some level, we're learning how to be two people at once, and on some level with this, because what we may be looking at is how, when we communicate with somebody else, since we're talking about third house themes, when we communicate with someone else, we might communicate with them from both our sun and our moon sign, right? We might, because it's all about creating that harmonious balance and that sort of marriage. And so when you create a sacred bond like that in any marriage, just through time, the two sides, they start to pick up on one another's attributes and qualities and stuff like that, because they have sort of created that bond in that marriage. And when you admire something about someone, and when you love someone about something about someone, you tend to pick up on their qualities. So, in some sense, these two sides might pick up on one another, and they might become like this unified force. So you could be communicating from your moon and your sun as one, and learning from your moon and your sun as one, but acting together, but acting as one force together in a marriage as a unified force. Two different aspects happening in a unified force, that at this time is learning, getting information, and also, receiving that information, being a carrier for that information, and also communicating that information with others. Right now, this is a very much a learning process for you. You might be learning how to communicate, from both spaces at once. It's like a marriage. It's like a unification of the two. So there's some interesting aspects that really go along with this whole theme right here. I really want to, you know, I really want you to understand that even if you are in a relationship, this can still apply to you on a singular basis. Because once again, we are a reflection. The people in our lives, the people who are in our lives, are simply a reflection of who we are inside of ourselves. So a lot of times we'll be arguing with other people and not realizing who we're really arguing with is actually ourselves. But we just don't know it yet. I can tell you what, I'm a Pisces, and my moon is in Aries. And I love Aries people because my moon is in Aries. So I have this deep understanding of them. But, um, but they drive me nuts because I'm a Pisces, and Pisces is more sensitive, and Aries is more, I don't want to necessarily say insensitive, but they're not really sensitive to other people's feelings like that. That's not their energy. So it can, Aries, but at the same time, it's like you have to learn how to mediate between the two and how to find compromise. And so every day a practice becomes for me, how to marry my Pisces side with my Aries side. Two polar opposites in the fact that one is the first sign of the zodiac and the other one is the last sign of the zodiac. One is completely about the self, and the other one is completely selfless and about others. So, how to marry the two, becomes very interesting for me. you know, um, and the same thing could be said when it comes to any. See, my energies, those two energies, what you may call a semi-sextile, because they're right next to one another, because right after Pisces, Aries starts back up again. So if you are Leo, for example, but you have a Cancer moon, it could be very difficult because those two energies are like right next to one another. But one of them is very emotional and needs emotional security and needs the safety of home and family. And the other one is independent. So, really learning how to communicate between your sun sign and your moon sign. Really learning to communicate with others as if you were both the moon sign and the sun sign, as if you were standing by your partner coming up to somebody. But that being said, the shaman of birth is also a very secretive force, meaning that the masculine may take the front end. Once again, going back to that, the feminine is the invisible force, takes the back end. Okay, we're not talking about a man versus a woman right now. You understand? We're talking about masculine energy versus feminine energy. Feminine energy is physical, yes, but it's also more invisible and behind the scenes. Masculine energy is the energy that people see superficially. You understand? So the superficial energy might do the talking and might do the speaking in the physical sense. But the feminine energy is also speaking too, and the two of them are still speaking together as one force. And this really is initiating that. So there may be times where you might sound like a whole nother someone else besides yourself during the communication, but understanding that you are talking for yourself, it's just a different aspect of you. But people don't know that. And that's the part that you might have to keep behind the scenes, because the moon is a secretive emotional force. She's not loud and outspoken like the sun. You understand? It's that sacredness. The moon is more of a receptive, reflective, yet emotionally strong force, while the sun is a more externalized, you can see it right in your face force, okay? What I also want to put emphasis on as well is that it creates a product of love. This product of love that the moon force, the seventh house, carries within the womb. And this product of love can be a feeling, can be a dream. I find that the shaman of birth has a lot to do with communicating with the invisible realm, and also any that includes any dreams, aspirations, any new ideas that might come to mind. The shaman of birth generally shows up when one side of your life is over and another one is beginning, but doesn't necessarily tell other people. about how that new life is beginning. Because it all begins on a spiritual with a feeling or an idea, you understand? This feeling or idea, it impregnates you. And it's an impregnation that can only happen when the invisible and the visible sides are married and partnered together. So, speaking of, impregnation, we do have this shell here, and this shell for me, it's like it to me it's a fountain, it's a well. And to me, anytime I see this, it's saying that it is in a place where it is ready to receive spiritual water. Okay, that includes transpersonal feelings and emotions. That includes spiritual water. Uh, because when we go into the West, which is where Libra's medicine resides, we're going into the spiritual. We're going into transpersonal. This is why in the West it's called dying to your ego, because you got to get beyond yourself. The shell here is at the center, meaning that the suggestion for you, Leo, is that you get centered. That you get centered and that you open up your entire body to receiving spiritual waters, spiritual transpersonal waters, and allowing yourself to be reconnected to that, and allowing yourself to be filled, to be impregnated by idea or a feeling or a vision, you know, but to really just allow yourself to be open to that. Anytime I see this shell, to me, there is this sense that I think of Archangel Gabriel with the shell, the messenger, when you're getting ready to have a baby, when you're getting ready to have a child, but letting you know, like, in a spiritual sense beforehand, that that's what's happening. So if you're having thoughts about having children at this time, I would say this shell is a good omen that you may have children at this time. And I also want to acknowledge that this shell pops up, especially in this way, when your well has ran dry and um, it's ready to receive new water. Okay, new spiritual water. It's ready for the rain to come down upon it. And at your center, at your core right now, we're looking at that. We're looking at receiving the spiritual waters from the celestial heavens, really opening yourself up to it and allowing yourself to really receive it. Opening that cup, allowing that cup of that is your body, that is your soul, to be filled at your center. It's all happening at your center. So it's a call for you to get centered at this time. Okay, I'm being directed. I'm being directed here in the north. I'm being directed here in the north with my aquamarine sea glass. And whenever I look at this aquamarine sea glass here, what we're really looking at is we're looking at communication. We're even looking at communication with the invisible realm, and it's directing up towards spirit. This point is being directed towards spirit. But I would say that because this is in upside down, it's not right side up. I would say that there's a lot of senselessness going on. There's a lot of inability to accept certain truths in one's life or to speak those truths um, in your life right now. And maybe to some extent, you don't necessarily know what to speak or how to speak it. Maybe you're just in kind of a place of confusion. You don't know necessarily what your truth is. Maybe there's some illusions happening. I notice how it's here in the north. And we were just talking about impregnation because this is a really good sign of conception, of being able to conceive. So for those of you that we're looking at and you have a shaman of birth, so for those of you that are actually looking for to physically conceiving, this may be a good sign. But what I really want you to understand is that we want to be able to communicate with that baby on a spiritual level, whatever that is. There has to be an inner communication before it, you know, before it actually comes into your being physically. It's already in your being spiritually, emotionally. You understand? But it needs to be into your being before it comes into your being physically. It what you got to do is you got to learn how to communicate with that inner force. You may not be able to see it, sense it, as far as understanding um, that it may not be superficial. You may not be physically pregnant at this time, right? Or you may be. I don't know. But the whole point is that whether you are, whether you aren't, to me, what this is pointing to, what this is asking you to do, is see it, sense it, feel it now. And it doesn't necessarily have to be, and I'm talking to you whether you're man or woman, by the way. I understand man can't get prego, but men can get prego too. When their wives or their lovers, or if you're in a heterosexual relationship, or if you're in a homosexual relationship, whatever the case might be. But when your partner is prego, you're prego. That's my point. Okay. So anyhow, but my point is that if you're wanting a child, the first thing you have to be willing to do is communicate with that child and to have faith and knowledge that they're coming to you. So this suggests to me that there's some struggle with that. There's some struggle with communication with the other side, not necessarily knowing how to communicate with the other side, not necessarily knowing how to communicate with the invisible side, and to really kind of prep yourself and prepare yourself for the fact that you can have a child. I don't care what situation you're in, because spirit can make miracles happen. If you look to spirit and you have faith in spirit, spirit can make miracles happen. I don't care what your situation is. So if you really, if your truth, if you're ignoring your truth right now, whatever that truth is for you, there's an inner truth, Leo, that you're ignoring right now, that is causing you to not really be able to speak from a place of truth with this bone. So what we really want to look at is really going deep inside of yourself, communicating with the inner self, learning how to be in communication with that inner self. Okay, learning how to be open to the process, learning to open yourself up, to be vulnerable, to have faith, and to trust that spirit is going to gift you with with a blessing. Spirit is going to gift you with the blessing, whatever that blessing looks like for you. Doesn't have to be a child. It can be, the child is a metaphor, you understand, for a creation, an idea, but something that is impregnating your spirit, your soul. It's a metaphor. It's not literal. It doesn't have to be. It can be. Okay. So opening yourself up to that. And what I see here is stagnation, because anytime I see my volcanic dress, it's a sign to me that you've got to set yourself free. You've got to let yourself go. You've got to give yourself permission to dance, to go full force, to receive the holiness of yourself released. What I love about this show is that it happens to be in the section of the West that is the Libra section. You can see the symbol here of Libra. And just under Libra here happens to be the first trimester of Libra, or the first decan of Libra, which is the Two of Swords. Lots of people look at the Two of Swords as if, lots of people look at the Two of Swords, crossing swords and conflict. What I have found with the Two of Swords is that the Two of Swords is secretive. It's creating a barrier, saying keep out. If there is communication, the crossing of swords, it's a partnership kind of communication. Like the Musketeers, all for one and one for all. You know what I mean? They cross swords with one another, and up in the air, but anyway, that's a whole different. The whole point here, not to get off the subject too much here, to stay on point, um, you know, what we're really looking at here is this, but giving yourself there's stagnation. Certain thought forms and belief systems are holding you back right now. Certain traditions are holding you back right now from being able to communicate fully and clearly with the other side, and releasing yourself. You know, there's an inner side of yourself. Your soul self is still there. You understand? And even though you may not be able to communicate with the other side, because you may have blockages with it, doesn't mean that you can't communicate with it. So let me say that in a different way. You need to connect with your soul, because you're not consciously aware of your gifts of being able to communicate with the other side doesn't mean that you can't communicate with the other side. If you could connect with yourself on a soul level, you'll be able to connect with the other side. So, really releasing yourself from certain thought forms and belief systems, really detaching from who you were. We talked earlier about detaching from who you were yesterday, how the shaman of birth, the medicine of that is really going within. Think about it in this way. The sun descending upon the earth, the sun, being taken over by night, is like you going home, right? The conscious self going home, going into the darkness. So in that same vein, your conscious self, your identity, everything you identified yourself with, it's like a death happening. It's like you're moving towards the night. You're moving towards the darkness. You're learning to communicate. You're consciously focusing yourself into the darkness. So anyway, that becomes a secretive force. We talked about secrets and how the moon it becomes a secretive force. It's a force that you don't necessarily express with everybody else. It's a force that is secretive. It's a force that is not shared with everyone. So I'm going into a space and a place right now. I don't want to share with people my truths, my ideas. But I know a lot of the trouble that I have definitely seen is that, especially with externalized energies, it can be very difficult and it can be very hard for you to be in a secretive space, which is probably a part of why it's hard for you to communicate here. This is probably a part of why you might need to be open there. You got to be willing to open yourself up to the night and the day, because it completes you. It makes you total and whole and complete. When you're total and you're whole and complete, when you're full circle like that, you're not afraid of anything, because you're whole. You understand? You're whole. No one can take anything away from you because you're whole. No one can influence you because you're whole. You understand? So you have to be, Libra is about going within, Leo, and you have to be willing to go within. Now, I just had this thought that some of you might have sun signs in a different sign, but then you might have your rising sign in Libra, and that's why you're here. But still, it's the same thing. This is a time for you to go within right now, and to release yourself fully and completely from the trappings of an identity, because you are more than just one way of seeing yourself. You understand? There are many different aspects of you. You, Leo, are many things. You're not just one. You are many things. And those many things complete you and make you who you are. The world has seen one aspect of who you are. It's time for you to transform. It's time for you to go within, to create that cocoon and to transform yourself, to get ready to transform yourself. So you've got to be willing to release yourself from who you've been so that you can move into who you're becoming. So you've got to be willing to play that. You got to be willing to dance that, free that. And when you do, you'll be able to speak your truth. Perhaps part of the reason why it's hard for you to speak your truth is because at this time, you may not know what your truth is. You may be so caught up in the identity that you're not able to speak your truth. Because that identity of your life only represents one aspect of you. And your truth on a soul level might be pointing you in a different direction. But that's also a road that you must walk alone for a little while. And external energy in itself, extroverted energy, definitely has challenges with walking alone. But this may be a road you may need to walk alone for a little while. Even if you're communicating with people, even if you find yourself communicating with people and doing stuff, there might be an inner source there that you cannot communicate. You can't be completely vulnerable and open. There's some things right now you might not be completely open and vulnerable about. So that's their medicine. I hope this has helped you. I hope it's given you some sort of insight as we come into the Libra season. I hope it's giving you some sort of insight. You know, if you are someone that say is into meditation, this might be a great time for you to meditate and to contemplate, and to really like kind of look over your experiences. And it's also is a great time for being objective as well. So, I mean, just different things that you might play with and just experiment with and just see how it goes. There's really no right or wrong. It's just all a matter of relationship and balance and how you choose to be in a relationship. It's just choice. And there's no right or wrong. So I want to encourage you forward, sending you love and blessings, and wishing you the best time with this. I think you can do well. I pray that you will eventually get to a place where you will be able to speak your inner truth, because we're looking at inner truth here with this stone. I pray and I'm so thankful, and I hope to see you next time. A Galanor.